The crystal wine glasses clinked against bone china as the Morton family gathered for their monthly dinner at my parents' Victorian mansion. I smoothed down my simple black dress, a handcrafted piece from a small Parisian atelier, though they'd assume it was from a department store, and prepared for the usual round of condescension about my career choice. "So, Alexandra," my brother James began, adjusting his surgeon's coat he'd deliberately worn to dinner, "still enjoying your little teaching adventure?" I touched the vintage Van Cleef Arpels pendant hidden beneath my collar, my grandmother's parting gift, and checked the time. In exactly 53 minutes, their carefully constructed hierarchy of success would be completely upended. "The students are wonderful," I replied quietly, watching my father wince at the word students, as if it physically pained him. "This semester has been particularly rewarding." "Rewarding?" My sister Catherine scoffed, her Stanford Medical School ring catching the light as she reached for her wine. "You mean exhausting yourself with other people's children for barely enough money to afford rent?" If they only knew that my barely affordable rent was actually the entire top floor of the city's most exclusive residential building, or that the little teaching adventure was just a cover for my real work as the founder of Aurora Educational Foundation, the mysterious organization that had been revolutionizing education across the country. "Teaching has its own rewards," I murmured, accepting the cheaper wine they always served me, assuming I couldn't appreciate the expensive vintage they were drinking. The same vintage I had cases of in my private cellar. "Alexandra," my mother sighed, her voice carrying that familiar mix of disappointment and forced concern, "you have a degree from Harvard. You could have been anything. A doctor like your siblings, a lawyer, even a professor at a prestigious university. Instead, you're just a substitute teacher." I hid my smile behind my wine glass, thinking about the documents waiting in my office safe. Papers that would reveal that their precious Milton University, where both my siblings held honorary positions, was about to receive the largest private donation in its history from me. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of real achievement," James added, shooting me a pitying look. "Some people are just meant for simpler things." My phone buzzed quietly, a message from my foundation. "So, final paperwork signed. Press release scheduled for 8 p.m. University board assembling for emergency meeting. Your family still doesn't suspect." "At least she's doing something useful," Catherine said with fake generosity. "Someone has to teach the basic subjects. Though," she added with a smirk, "I heard the science department at your school is particularly underfunded." I thought about the state-of-the-art research facility my foundation was about to fund, not just at Milton University, but at schools across the city. The same schools my family dismissed as beneath their notice. "The sciences are challenging everywhere," I agreed softly, watching my father's face darken at what he perceived as admission of failure. "Which is why we're so proud of the new research wing at Milton," my father announced, deliberately changing the subject. "James and Catherine have both been asked to serve on the advisory board. Real contributions to education, not just classroom basics." I checked my watch again. 30 minutes until the press release. 30 minutes until they learned that while they were bragging about advisory board positions, I had been quietly building one of the largest educational foundations in the country. "Speaking of Milton," James leaned forward, his voice dripping with self-importance, "we're reviewing proposals for the new science center. Very exclusive, very expensive. The kind of project that requires real understanding of academic excellence, not just teaching experience." My phone buzzed again, another message. "University president requesting urgent meeting with anonymous donor. Your brother's research proposal has been flagged for review." "How fascinating," I replied, thinking about how James's proposal had already been rejected by my foundation's review board for being outdated and inefficient. He just didn't know it yet. "You should see the facilities we're planning," Catherine added, never one to be outdone. "State-of-the-art laboratories, research spaces that would probably seem like science fiction to your students." I thought about the advanced learning centers my foundation had already built in underfunded schools across the city, facilities that made Milton's current labs look like elementary school science fairs. "The children would love that," I said truthfully, watching them all mistake my genuine enthusiasm for naive excitement. "Children," my father muttered, swirling his wine. "A Harvard graduate reduced to teaching children basic mathematics. Where did we go wrong?" The family butler, who actually worked for my foundation's intelligence division, discreetly topped up their wine glasses while gathering information about their university connections. I'd learned long ago that the best way to understand institutional problems was to listen to those who thought they controlled them. To real academic achievement, James raised his glass, smirking in my direction, and to those who support it from the sidelines. I raised my glass too, knowing that in exactly 15 minutes, their notion of academic achievement would be completely redefined. Sometimes the best lessons are taught without a classroom at all. At exactly 8 p.m., as my father was lecturing about the importance of meaningful contributions to academia, every phone in the dining room chimed simultaneously. The butler, my undercover operative, smoothly turned on the large television in the adjacent room, which my father always kept tuned to financial news during dinner. Breaking news. Anonymous donor pledges historic $200 million to Milton University, largest single donation in institution's history. The expensive wine in Catherine's glass sloshed dangerously as her hand trembled. James's fork clattered against his plate, his perfectly practiced surgeon's steadiness deserting him. My father's face, usually composed from years of board meetings, showed the first cracks of genuine shock. 200 million? My mother whispered, her voice barely audible. The Aurora Educational Foundation has announced an unprecedented investment in educational infrastructure, the news anchor continued. This includes a complete overhaul of Milton University's science facilities and the establishment of 15 satellite learning centers across underserved communities. I watched as James frantically pulled out his phone, probably trying to reach his contacts on the university board. The same board that had met with me as the anonymous founder of Aurora, just hours earlier. "This must be a mistake," Catherine declared, though her voice lacked its usual authority. "The university would have told us about such a major donor." "The Aurora Foundation has been an enigmatic force in education reform," the news continued. "Their innovative approach has transformed numerous institutions, though the founder maintains strict anonymity." My phone lit up with a message from my CO. "University board releasing complete plans now. Your brother's research proposal officially declined. New facility will focus on integrated community access." Declined. James sputtered, reading similar information on his own phone. "But my proposal was perfect. Who do these Aurora people think they are?" "Actually," I spoke up, my quiet voice somehow cutting through their chaos, "your proposal was outdated. The methodology was flawed and the budget was inflated by about 40%. All eyes turned to me, confusion slowly giving way to disbelief. "How would you possibly know that?" Catherine demanded, her Stanford ring clicking nervously against her wine glass. I reached into my bag, a handmade leather piece they'd dismissed as cheap, and pulled out my foundation's portfolio, embossed with a subtle aurora pattern. "Because I reviewed it personally this morning." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the butler paused in his orchestrated movements. "You?" James laughed, but it sounded hollow. "The substitute teacher?" "Actually," I replied calmly, opening the portfolio, "I prefer educational innovator. Though, founder and CEO of the Aurora Educational Foundation works too." "That's impossible," my father interjected, his voice rising. "You can barely afford your apartment on a teacher's salary." "Who said I can't afford it?" I smiled, pulling out a stack of documents. "I own the building. Just like I own the research facilities you've been trying to access, the educational technology companies you've been trying to partner with, and yes, the new science center that just rejected James's proposal." The screens behind me filled with images of Aurora's projects, cutting-edge facilities, innovative programs and transformative initiatives that had revolutionized education across the country. "While you were all focused on your prestigious titles and board positions," I continued, "I was building something that actually changes lives. Something that makes education accessible to everyone, not just the elite." But the resources needed." My mother stammered. "You mean like the trust fund you cut off when I chose teaching over medical school?" I asked quietly. "I invested it. Built it into something bigger. Something that matters more than another doctor's nameplate on a door." The butler smoothly distributed folders to each family member, detailed breakdowns of Aurora's impact and reach. My father's hands shook as he opened his copy. "These numbers," he muttered. "The scope of this. is far beyond anything you imagined I could achieve. I finished for him. Amazing what someone can accomplish when they're underestimated, isn't it? The chandelier cast dancing shadows across my father's prized mahogany dining table as the family tried to process the magnitude of what they were reading. The folders contained not just the Milton University project details, but Aurora's complete portfolio, billions in assets, hundreds of educational initiatives, and a global reach that made their university board positions look positively provincial. The Learning Innovation Center at Stanford? Catherine's voice cracked. The one I've been trying to get access to for my research? Aurora Foundation funded it, I confirmed, taking a sip of their special wine, the same vintage I had served at my foundation's last board meeting. Your application is actually under review, though you might want to revise the section about community engagement. It's a bit lacking. James was frantically scrolling through his phone. The Global Education Summit in Geneva last month. That keynote speaker, Dr. A. Winter. My professional name, I nodded. I believe you called that speech surprisingly insightful at last week's dinner, right before suggesting I might benefit from some basic professional development courses. My phone buzzed again. The university president was now practically begging for a meeting with Aurora's founder. The irony of my family's prestigious Milton University desperately seeking the attention of their just-a-substitute teacher daughter wasn't lost on anyone. Ms. Winter, my butler/head of research whispered, the global press is requesting statements about the Milton Initiative. And the Education Secretary's office has called twice. The Education Secretary? My father's voice was barely a whisper. You work with? I work with anyone who's serious about transforming education, I cut in. Unfortunately, that hasn't included my own family until now. I stood up, smoothing down my simple dress. Would you like to know why I called it the Aurora Foundation? My mother, who had barely touched her food since the announcement, found her voice. Because of the lights? Like your science center's design? No, I smiled, touching my grandmother's pendant. Because Grandma always said education should be like the dawn, illuminating everything it touches, accessible to everyone, and impossible to ignore once it begins. I projected one final set of images onto the dining room's screens, photos of my classroom, my students, and the lives that had been changed through Aurora's work. That basic math I teach? I continued. It's part of an innovative curriculum now being adopted by schools worldwide. Those underfunded science labs? They're testing grounds for educational approaches that make your university facilities look outdated. But why keep teaching? James demanded. With all this, why stay in a classroom? Because unlike some people, I met his gaze steadily, I believe in understanding the ground level of what I'm trying to change. Every policy, every grant, every initiative we create is based on real classroom experience, not just theoretical research done from an ivory tower. The butler began distributing another round of documents, Aurora's next phase of initiatives. The numbers made even Catherine's surgeon salary look like pocket change. $20 billion in new educational investments, I announced to the stunned room. Including, if you're interested, some positions that might let you actually make a difference instead of just adding lines to your resumes. You're offering us jobs? Catherine asked incredulously. I'm offering you a chance to be part of real change, I corrected. Though you'll have to go through the standard application process. Aurora doesn't believe in preferential treatment, even for family. My phone chimed again. The Milton University Board had convened an emergency session to discuss the dramatic reshaping of their institution. My father's position as trustee suddenly seemed far less influential than it had an hour ago. The naming ceremony for the new science center is next month, I continued, enjoying the way James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I considered keeping it anonymous, but Grandma's name deserves to be on something that will help generations of students. Grandma, my mother whispered. But she was just a high school teacher? I finished. She was. And she understood more about real education than all your board positions and medical degrees combined. The screens now showed live feeds from Aurora's projects around the world. Students learning in state-of-the-art facilities, teachers implementing revolutionary methods, communities being transformed through education. My classroom starts at 8 a.m. tomorrow, I said, gathering my things. After that, I have meetings with 3 education ministers, 2 Nobel laureates, and yes, the president of Milton University. But I'll still be teaching third-period math, because those students matter just as much as any research grant or university endowment. I touched my grandmother's pendant one last time. She left me this necklace and a choice. I could spend my life proving myself to this family, or I could prove that education is about more than titles and prestige. The butler opened the dining room doors as my car, an electric vehicle worth more than my father's house, pulled up outside. The Aurora Foundation welcomes all sincere partners in educational innovation, I announced to my still stunned family. When you're ready to focus on actual impact rather than just status, you know where to find me. Though, I smiled slightly, you'll have to go through my teaching assistant to schedule a meeting. I'm rather busy these days. As I walked out of the house that had hosted so many dinners of dismissal and condescension, I heard James call out, "Alexandra, wait." I turned back one last time. It's Dr. Winter in professional settings. Though my students just call me Ms. Alex. Sometimes the simplest titles mean the most. The night air was cool as I stepped into my car, leaving behind a family forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about success, education, and the daughter they'd dismissed as just a teacher. Sometimes the best lessons aren't taught from a podium or an operating theater. Sometimes they're taught by showing people that their entire definition of achievement has been wrong all along. And as my driver pulled away from the Victorian mansion, I touched my grandmother's pendant and smiled. Like the dawn she'd named my foundation after, true enlightenment often comes after the darkest dismissal. Perhaps my family would finally learn that the greatest achievement isn't in the titles you hold, but in the lives you change along the way.